The moment Harriet Colson walked through the glass doors of the Pinnacle Tower atrium, every conversation in the lobby dropped half a volume. She didn't rush. She never rushed anymore. That was the first thing she had relearned about herself in the 2 years. Since Marcus had handed her divorce papers across their kitchen island, the granite counter still warm from the espresso she'd made him that morning, she crossed the marble floor in measured steps, her coat buttoned against the January cold she'd carried in from Bay Street, and she did not look toward the restaurant on the left side of the lobby. She didn't need to. She already knew he was in there. His assistant, his former assistant, the one who had quit last spring with a resignation letter that was really more of a confession, had texted her 40 minutes ago. He's there, table by the window. She's with him. Harriet had read the message twice, then set her phone face down on the passenger seat and finished the drive downtown in silence. She had not come here for him. That was the truth she repeated to herself as the elevator doors opened and she stepped inside. She had come for the 4:30 meeting on the 32nd floor, the same meeting she had been preparing for since October, the same meeting that had nothing to do with Marcus Colson, or the woman he was currently sharing a bottle of Burgundy with 7 floors below. She pressed 32 and watched the lobby shrink. 2 years earlier, Harriet had been the kind of woman who believed she understood her own life completely. She was 38, an architect with her name on 3 civic buildings in Toronto, and a reputation for knowing exactly how much structural load any given beam could carry before it gave. She had applied this precision to her marriage the same way she applied it to everything else. She had believed that if she understood the forces at work, she could keep the whole thing standing. She had been wrong. Marcus Colson had been her husband for 11 years. He was handsome in the way that photographs flatten, better looking in a frame than in conversation. He had started the decade as a mid-level project manager at a commercial development firm and ended it as the company's VP of acquisitions, a title that suited his confidence more than his ability. Had never said that out loud, not once. She had hosted his clients, helped draft the language in 2 of his proposals, and declined 3 commissions during the years when his work required her to be available and present and decorative in ways she had not quite understood she was agreeing to when she said yes at a ceremony in Niagara-on-the-Lake on a Saturday in June. The woman's name was Courtney, 29 years old. She worked in brand partnerships at a lifestyle company that sent influencers to Tulum. Harriet had not been able to look her up for the first 4 months because she did not want to feel the specific kind of diminishment that comes from understanding who replaced you. When she finally did look, she felt it anyway. Marcus had not left Harriet for Courtney in any clean or honest way. He had simply started lying earlier in the evening, coming home later, and touching the things in their house, the towels, the coffee mugs, the car keys on the hook, with a careful absence, as if he were already practicing for the day he would stop being responsible for any of it. When Harriet had finally said the word leaving out loud, he had looked almost relieved, like she had done the hard part for him. The settlement had taken 7 months. Harriet had gone into it expecting fairness and come out of it, understanding that fairness was a concept that required both people to believe in it simultaneously. The house on Rosedale Valley Road had been sold. She had moved into a rental on DuPont while she rebuilt. She had taken every commission she had declined during the marriage. She had worked 16-hour days not out of ambition, but out of the specific discipline required not to collapse. And then, 14 months ago, she had gotten a call from Roland Finch. Roland Finch was 71 years old and had built half of downtown Vancouver before turning his attention to the kind of civic architecture that did not make money but made cities worth living in. He had a foundation. He had opinions. He had a budget that was not discussed in public. He had called Harriet because he had seen the waterfront community hub she had designed for the city of Hamilton, and he had wanted to know if she could do something like that but larger and more permanent and in a city that was watching. Their first meeting had lasted 4 hours. He had asked her questions that most clients did not think to ask. She had answered in more detail than she had allowed herself in years. By the end of it, something had shifted in the room in a way she could not quite name. He had offered her the lead architect position on the Finch Cultural Center, a 340 million project that would reshape a full city block in Ottawa. It was the largest commission she had ever been offered. It was also the thing she had spent most of her career building toward without knowing she was doing it. She had said yes before she left the room. What she had not expected was that Roland Finch would also become, over the following months, something she had not had in a long time. A person who took her seriously. He called her at reasonable hours and asked real questions. He pushed back on her designs when he disagreed and told her why, not as a correction, but as a conversation. He introduced her at industry events as his architect, not as the person handling the project, and there was a distinction in how he said it that she felt but could not easily explain. She did not allow herself to think about what that meant for longer than a few minutes at a time. The 32nd floor smelled like new carpet and expensive coffee. Harriet checked in at reception, was handed a visitor badge, and was shown to a boardroom where 3 people were already seated with binders and water glasses. Roland stood when she walked in. He was the only one who did. "Mrs. Coulson." "Finch." She set her portfolio case on the table and opened it with the efficiency of someone who had done this 8,000 times. "I have the updated structural integration report and the revised elevation drawings. Should we start with the east facade issue or the mechanical systems?" "The east facade," said the man across from Roland, Kenneth Yee, the city liaison, who she had worked with twice before and liked for his directness. "We have concerns about the cladding timeline." "Good. So do I." She sat down and began. This was what she was best at. Not the social architecture of rooms, who stood, who deferred, who needed to feel heard before they could hear anyone else. The actual architecture. The problem in front of her. She could feel Roland watching her from his end of the table, not with the appraising attention of someone evaluating her, but with the particular quality of attention that someone pays when they are simply interested in what you are going to say next. She had not felt that from a man who was not her colleague or her contractor in so long that it took her longer than it should have to recognize what it was. She focused on the cladding issue. The meeting ran until 6:15. When it ended, the others filed out, and Roland stayed. He refilled his water glass and sat back down as though he had nowhere to be, which she knew was not quite true. He had a dinner at 7 in the hotel across the street. She had seen it in the calendar invite thread. "The east facade," he said. "You already knew about the contractor timeline before today. I suspected. Why didn't you flag it at the November review?" She looked at him. "Because in November I didn't have enough evidence to raise it without looking like I was creating problems. Now I do. There's a difference between intuition and documentation." He nodded slowly. "Most architects in your position would have raised it in November anyway. Would have said something to protect themselves in case it became a problem. Most architects in my position haven't spent a year learning the difference between protecting yourself and actually solving the problem." She hadn't meant to say that. It was too close to something personal. Roland set down his water glass. He looked at her with an attention that was not uncomfortable but was very direct. "Your ex-husband is in the lobby restaurant," he said. She went still. "I noticed him when I came in," Roland said, without apology or softness, just information. "I recognize him from the industry events where you used to attend together. He's with a young woman." A pause. "I thought you should know before you went down." She held herself very carefully in the chair. "Thank you. You don't have to take the main elevator." "I know." She began putting her drawings back into the portfolio case, aligning the edges with the precision of someone doing something with their hands so the rest of them could be still. "I'm going to take the main elevator." He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "All right, I have nothing to be ashamed of," she said. "He does." The lobby was quieter at 6:30 than it had been at 4:30. The after-work rush had thinned. The restaurant on the left was warmer looking now, the lights slightly lower, the sound of it a murmur that Harriet could hear without trying to. She did not intend to stop. She genuinely did not. She had her portfolio case in one hand and her coat over her arm, and she was aimed at the revolving door and Bay Street and the parking structure 2 blocks over. She didn't know what made her slow. Maybe it was the laugh. Courtney's laugh, which Harriet had heard once, at a company holiday party 2 years before she'd known who Courtney was. A laugh that was designed to be heard from across a room. She heard it now, from the restaurant, and without making any decision she was aware of, she turned her head. Through the glass partition, She could see them at the table by the window. Marcus with his jacket off, his sleeves rolled, the way he looked when he was performing ease. Courtney with her hand on his arm. The bottle between them was half empty. And Marcus was looking back at her. He had seen her first. She could tell from the way he had stopped mid-sentence, the way his color had changed, the way he was very carefully not moving. She had spent 11 years learning to read his body, and she could read it from 20 feet away through glass. She did not freeze. She did not look away. She simply looked at him with the kind of steadiness that only becomes possible after you have spent 14 months rebuilding something that can hold weight. Then Roland Finch came to stand beside her. She had not realized he had followed her out. He had his coat on and his briefcase in hand, and he was heading, presumably, to his dinner across the street. He stopped when he reached her. He looked at the restaurant, then at her. He did not ask anything. What he did after a moment was say to her quietly, "Walk out with me." It was not a rescue. She didn't need one of those. It was more like what a colleague does when they understand that the way you exit a room matters. Not because of who is watching, but because you will remember it. She walked out with him. The cold hit immediately. Bay Street in January was its own particular argument against outdoor life. She pulled her coat on, and Roland held her portfolio case without being asked, which was the kind of thing he did without fanfare. "He looked like he'd swallowed something," Roland said. She almost laughed. "He has that face. Does he know about the center?" "Not unless he follows municipal development news, which he doesn't." Roland handed her portfolio case back. His dinner was in 40 feet, across the street, and through a revolving door. He looked at her with the directness she had come to expect from him. "You are the most technically rigorous person I have worked with in 20 years of building things," he said. "And I've worked with a lot of architects." She was quiet for a moment. On Bay Street, a streetcar ground past. "Why are you telling me that right now?" she asked. "Because," he said, "you just walked through that lobby like you owned the building, and you should know that's accurate. Your drawings are on file with the city. Your name is on the permit applications. Whatever else is in that restaurant, you built something today that will still be standing in 100 years. I thought you should hear that." She thought about the east facade. She thought about the cladding timeline and the mechanical integration, and the 16 months of work that had brought her to a boardroom on the 32nd floor of a tower where her ex-husband happened to be drinking Burgundy 1 floor up from the ground. "Same time Thursday?" she said. Roland smiled. "Same time Thursday." He crossed the street. She walked to the parking structure. The cold was clean and very specific, the way winter in Toronto always was, and she thought about the permit applications with her name on them, and about load-bearing structures, and about how the things that were designed to carry weight looked very different from the outside than they felt from within. Marcus called the next morning at 8:47. She saw his name on her phone and sat with it for 3 rings, not because she was deciding whether to answer, but because she was noticing what she felt, which was less than she expected. A kind of tired familiarity, like recognizing weather, she answered. "Harriet Marcus." A pause. She could hear him composing himself. She had heard that sound many times, the particular quality of silence that preceded something he had rehearsed. "That was a surprise," he said, "last night." "Was it? You looked." He stopped. Started again. "You looked good." She understood what he was doing. He was trying to locate her, to assess the distance between them, to understand whether she was the woman he had left or something else now. It was the kind of measurement people take when they have given something away and want to know if they can still get it back or if they even want to. "I had a meeting," she said. "I didn't know you'd be there. Who was the man you were with?" And there it was. "A client," she said. "He seemed." Another pause. "He's Roland Finch." Yes. The silence on his end had a different texture now. She recognized it. Recalibration. She had watched Marcus do it in business meetings when someone said a number he hadn't expected. The mental scramble behind still eyes. "You're working with Roland Finch." "I lead the design on the Finch Cultural Center. The project has been announced publicly, Marcus. It's on the Foundation's website." She heard his breathing change. He tried again. "That's a significant project." "It is." She did not elaborate. She had learned in the past 2 years that the most powerful thing she had was the ability to say a true thing and then simply stop talking. "I've been thinking," he said, "a lot, about how things ended. I remember how things ended, Harriet." His voice dropped in the way it used to when he was trying to be intimate. "I made mistakes. I know that, Courtney was. It was a mistake. I've been trying to." He stopped. "You saw us last night." "I did. That wasn't. It's complicated." "It looked uncomplicated," she said. "It looked like dinner." A long pause. "I miss you," he said. She looked at the permit drawing on her desk, the east facade elevation, the cladding detail she'd revised 3 times to get right. Her name was in the title block. H. Colson, lead architect. "I need to get to work," she said. "Don't call this number again unless it's about the property settlement we never fully closed. If there's anything outstanding there, send it through my solicitor." She hung up. She sat for a moment with the phone in her hand and noticed that she felt something she could not quite name immediately. Something in the vicinity of clean. Like a room that has been emptied of furniture that was never right for the space. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up the east facade file and went back to work. The news about Marcus and Courtney reached her 6 weeks later, indirectly, via an email from her friend Diane. Not the Diane from the names list, a different Diane, her university roommate, who lived in Oakville and still had mutual friends in the development world Marcus moved in. "Did you hear? His company is being audited. Something about procurement irregularities. Apparently it's been building since last fall." Harriet read the email at her drafting table, with a cup of coffee going cold beside her keyboard. She had not done anything to cause this. She wanted to be clear about that, at least to herself. She had not made calls or filed complaints or leveraged Roland's connections in any direction. She had simply left the restaurant lobby and gone back to work. She thought of what Marcus's assistant, the one who had quit, the one who had texted her that evening, had said to her months ago when they had met for coffee. "He's been using corporate accounts for personal expenses for a long time. There are emails. There are receipts. I didn't know what to do with it." Harriet had said, "That's not mine to act on, but if you have documentation and you feel you should report it, that's your decision to make." She hadn't told Marcus that she knew. She hadn't used it as leverage or mentioned it during the settlement or held it as a threat. She had simply refused to be responsible for him anymore, in any direction. But she had also kept the assistant's email address. When the audit story began to develop, and a financial journalist who covered commercial real estate in Toronto reached out to Harriet for comment. As his former spouse, "Do you have any insight into the financial management culture at Colson Acquisitions?" She had forwarded the journalist to the assistant's contact information with a single line. "This person has direct documentation and has been prepared to speak for some time. I trust her account." She did not give a comment herself. She did not need to. The Finch Cultural Center broke ground on a Thursday in late March, on a morning so unreasonably bright it felt staged. Harriet stood at the perimeter of the site, in her hard hat and her good coat, watching the first excavation machinery move, and felt the particular satisfaction of a thing that had been abstract for 18 months becoming concrete in the most literal possible sense. Roland stood beside her. He had been briefed that morning on the procurement story in the Toronto Development Press. He read everything, and he had said nothing about it when he arrived. He had said, "The site looks right," and she had said, "It always looked right. Now it's ours." There was a small ceremony, local officials, a few board members, a reporter from the Globe and Mail who photographed Harriet in her hard hat beside the project signage, her name listed under lead architect, in text large enough to read from the sidewalk. She thought briefly of the lobby of the Pinnacle Tower, of Marcus at the window table, of the walk across the marble floor she had taken without hurrying. She thought of the permit applications with her name in the title block, of Roland saying, in the January cold, "You built something today that will still be standing in 100 years. Of what it meant that that was simply true. The excavator took its first full bite of frozen ground, and the crowd made the sound crowds make at beginnings. And Harriet Colson watched it with the particular steadiness of a woman who has learned, at some expense, the difference between what is load-bearing and what is decoration, and made her peace with which was which.